Just a week ago, I found myself in a situation that I never thought I would encounter as a 36-year-old woman married to my husband, a 39-year-old man. I cheated on him with my floor supervisor, a man in his 50s, and it is incredibly painful for me to admit that. In the spirit of honesty, I must take responsibility for my actions, and that acknowledgement weighs heavily on my heart. Let me explain how things unfolded. My husband and I had planned to attend a work party together, an event that was meant to be a fun night out for us. However, just moments before we were set to leave, our babysitter canceled on us. This unexpected turn of events left my husband with no choice but to stay home and care for our child. In that moment, I made the decision to go to the party by myself, thinking it would be harmless. Little did I know that this choice would lead to a series of events that would unravel our lives. During the weeks leading up to that night, I had noticed a strange tension between me and my supervisor since he had been transferred to our floor a few months back. It was an unspoken, electric energy that I tried to brush off. My husband, who is perceptive and attentive, picked up on it too. I reassured him repeatedly that there was nothing to worry about, even as I felt the growing unease within myself. I was in denial, convincing myself that it was all in my head. When I arrived at the party, my supervisor started showering me with compliments about how I looked and the outfit I had chosen for the evening. The attention felt intoxicating and flattering, and before I knew it, I found myself getting swept away by the moment. One thing led to another, and this innocent work gathering turned into a night spent in a hotel room just a few blocks away from where the party was held. Looking back, I realized my husband's instincts about my relationship with my supervisor were right on point. I stayed at that hotel until the early hours of the morning, and when I finally returned home, my husband was waiting for me. He immediately noticed that I had been at a hotel instead of the party venue, which, regrettably, I had completely forgotten about because we share our locations through an app. There was no escaping the truth, I had cheated on him, and I had been aware of the potential consequences of my actions for weeks. This was not just a spontaneous mistake but a premeditated choice that shattered the trust we had built. While our marriage wasn't without its flaws, I had no right to betray his trust in such a devastating manner. I've been struggling with low self-esteem and body image issues since giving birth last year, which have made me feel less desirable. Despite my efforts to hit the gym and shed some baby weight, I felt like my husband barely noticed the changes or the struggles I faced. Our intimate life had become monotonous and unexciting, an all too familiar routine shaped by the exhaustion that comes with raising our energetic toddler. I know that none of these circumstances justify my actions, but I believe they provide crucial context for understanding why I behaved so recklessly that night. I let go of my inhibitions because I desperately wanted to feel attractive and desired again. The guilt I now carry for my actions is overwhelming, not just for betraying him but for how deeply I have hurt our family. Despite our ups and downs, I genuinely love my husband, and while I can't undo the damage I've caused, I'm committed to making amends. My husband, having experienced the pain of his parents' divorce, is determined not to let our child suffer the consequences of my choices. He has expressed a willingness to grant me a second chance but has made it clear that I need to cut all ties with my supervisor, even if it means sacrificing a potential career opportunity. This request left me torn. The job could have been a significant step forward in my career, but I ultimately realized that it was not just about my professional aspirations. It was about the promises I made to him and our family. After some soul-searching, I decided to put my family first, prioritizing our relationship over my career ambitions. I believe that was the right choice, as I understand the depth of my husband's pain and the emotional scars I've inflicted. I am determined to make things right, but navigating the aftermath of my betrayal is anything but easy. I can feel the anguish radiating from him, and it's heart-wrenching to see the damage my actions have caused in our relationship. I am grateful that my husband is willing to work through this with me, and we are considering counseling as a step toward healing. I am fully committed to becoming the wife he deserves, even though I know the healing process will require time and concerted effort. I recognize that he has a right to feel inadequate and hurt, and I will do everything in my power to repair the bond we've built, even as I grapple with the consequences of my poor choices. This situation is incredibly challenging for him, and I cannot overstate how much I regret placing him in such a difficult position. I am here with the intention of making amends, but I also recognize the reality of our situation. The journey toward redemption is going to be a long one, and there is no guarantee that we can restore things to how they once were. Ultimately, the priority has to be what is best for our family. I am fully committed to doing whatever is necessary to rebuild the trust and respect that I have shattered. I appreciate your time in reading this. I share my thoughts not to gain sympathy or pity, but to openly acknowledge my mistakes and the arduous journey I am currently navigating to rectify them. It is indeed a challenging process, yet I am learning something new every day. A lot has transpired since this all began, and I feel it is important to provide you with an update on how things have been evolving. To be completely honest, the situation has taken an unexpected turn that I feel compelled to share. After the heartbreaking conversation I had with my husband regarding my infidelity, I truly believed we were making headway. We had started communicating more effectively, attending counseling sessions, and I was genuinely trying to demonstrate my remorse. However, the dynamics became even more complicated when my husband took it upon himself to go through my call records. He discovered that I had spent over an hour on the phone with my supervisor while I was supposed to be at my mother's place. The reality was that I was actually at a mall, seeking privacy for the call. Although it may sound wrong, my supervisor was genuinely concerned about my potential move to a different floor at work, and I felt that my husband should not find out about those discussions, especially after he had expressly told me not to reach out to my supervisor. This decision led to me being caught in another lie, and I am still in disbelief that he felt the need to check my phone records. When he confronted me about this discovery, I was utterly taken aback. I fumbled through a series of excuses, but he was not willing to accept any of them. In a fit of anger and disappointment, he packed our child and left the house to stay elsewhere. Now, I find myself here, grappling with the mess I have created. The past month has been a whirlwind of emotions, and I have been feeling unheard and neglected ever since he learned about my one-night stand. I've been trying to give him the space he needs, tending to his every request, but often he remains distant and emotionally inaccessible. I get that he is hurting, but I also crave someone to confide in, and my supervisor was just there at the right moment. It is frustrating to feel as though he has not yet given me a fair chance. I am genuinely striving to make amends and have spent time reflecting on my low self-esteem and the issues I am facing. Doesn't that count for something? I recently learned that my husband has been staying with his parents, and it pains me to think that he is relying on their support as if he were still a child. Taking our child with him feels unjustifiable to me. It seems like he is using them as a way to leverage his feelings against me. I have attempted to reach out to him and initiate a conversation, but he remains unresponsive, as if he is shutting me out entirely. I recognize that I deserve this treatment after my actions, but the pain of being shut out still weighs heavily on my heart. I fully acknowledge my mistakes and the depth of hurt I have caused, but I can't help but wish we could return to a place where we resolved our issues through honest communication rather than spiraling into this painful standoff. I feel an intense sense of remorse about the entire situation. I am acutely aware that I have hurt him profoundly, and my continued dishonesty has only compounded the pain. Watching him in such distress is incredibly challenging, and I can't help but wish I had been more forthcoming from the beginning. I fully understand why he is so hurt and angry. Trust is fragile, and I have done significant damage to it. My mind is constantly racing as I reflect on my actions, realizing that my attempts to rebuild trust have been overshadowed by my dishonesty. It has become clear to me that it is not just enough to express regret, I must also be forthright about my actions and their consequences. I have created a chaotic situation, and I know I need to face the repercussions. For now, I am giving my husband the space he requires. It is clear that my behavior has caused him immense pain, and I want to respect his emotions and boundaries during this time. My hope is that as time progresses, we might find a way to reach a point of mutual understanding, perhaps discovering a path through this turmoil together. I recognize that many aspects of my current situation are beyond my control, and I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt thanks for the support and guidance I have received from those around me. Hearing various perspectives has truly opened my eyes, and I am committed to learning from my past mistakes and growing as a person. I will keep everyone updated on my progress as I navigate this challenging period. The last few weeks have been incredibly difficult, and I believe that sharing my struggles with others online is important, especially since my husband has left with our child. Today marked a significant turning point, as he officially served me with divorce papers, and the reality of our marriage ending is weighing heavily on me. Accepting this situation has been a tough journey. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of this whole experience has been the lack of contact with our child. Not being able to see him continues to be a daily struggle. I completely grasp why my husband feels it's necessary to take this step to protect our child, and I can only hope that, in time, I can prove myself as a reliable parent and rebuild that trust. Compounding my difficulties is the fact that my family has turned their backs on me, leaving me feeling isolated and profoundly lonely. It's a harsh wake-up call to see how one mistake can reveal the true nature of those who are supposed to be closest to you. On the professional front, my supervisor has been relentless with his advances, but I'm doing my best to keep my distance. I'm well aware of the potential for rumors to swirl around the workplace, and I'm determined to avoid any further complications. Maintaining my professionalism is vital, especially given everything I'm currently facing. I can feel that the gossip has already started, and this situation has caused significant damage not only to my life but also to my husband and child. I often feel like a monster in all of this. The road ahead is unclear, but I am dedicated to learning from my past choices and striving toward a more positive future. I want to acknowledge everyone who has provided support and insights during this tumultuous time. Now, let's shift gears to another story that's just as compelling. My wife and I are both 38 years old. We tied the knot 18 years ago and are proud parents to two amazing kids, our 17-year-old son and our 16-year-old daughter. Our journey began when we were just 19 years old, meeting through mutual friends, and it was genuinely love at first sight. Despite being young and having limited financial means, our affection for each other helped us navigate the ups and downs of life. At that time, I was working in customer service for an internet service provider, while my wife held a position as an assistant coordinator in an office. We managed to find a nice apartment and even had two reliable cars. Just a few months after we got married, my wife became pregnant with our son, and around that same time, I received a promotion to a supervisory role, which came with a substantial pay increase. With my new position, we decided it would be best for my wife to stay home once our son was born. A year later, our daughter joined the family, bringing even more joy into our lives. As the years went on, we were able to purchase a beautiful 4-bedroom starter home in a friendly neighborhood perfect for raising kids. Even though parenthood was demanding, we always made a conscious effort to keep the spark alive in our relationship. I couldn't have felt prouder of my family or my career. It felt like we were living the quintessential American dream, and life seemed genuinely good. That is until everything turned upside down. One day at the office, I received a voicemail that would change everything. It was from a woman I'll refer to as Mrs. Jones, the wife of a former coworker of my wife. Intrigued but also anxious, I returned her call, only to hear information that I knew I wouldn't want to hear. As she opened up about what she needed to discuss, my heart sank as she revealed that my wife was having an affair with her husband. In that moment, I realized my world was about to change in ways I never could have imagined. Mrs. Jones recounted the shocking discovery she made earlier that week regarding her husband's infidelity. He had admitted to her that he had been involved in inappropriate conversations and meetings for over a year, although it had only become physical in the last week. The moment of truth came when she stumbled upon an explicit email exchange between her husband and my wife, detailing planned rendezvous at their home while she was at work. This revelation hit me hard, and I initially struggled to process the reality of the situation. When I returned home, I was confronted with my wife in tears, desperately pleading for my forgiveness. She was clearly in full crisis mode, having already been informed by her lover that their secret affair had come to light. Unbeknownst to me, his wife had reached out to me prior to my arrival. My wife had concocted a story about taking our children to my parents' house, claiming she wanted to surprise me with an impromptu date night. What I thought would be an ordinary evening quickly spiraled into an emotional nightmare. We cried together, both of us engulfed in our separate anguish, for what felt like an eternity. I had never experienced such intense pain, both physically and emotionally, and my wife mirrored my distress. Our night was consumed with tearful conversations, filled with my shouting as I questioned the reasons behind her betrayal. Throughout the chaos, she repeatedly begged me not to leave her, professing her deep love and expressing profound regret for her actions. She confirmed the details of the affair, as relayed by her lover, and promised that if I gave her another chance, she would strive to be the best wife imaginable, ensuring that I would never regret my decision to stay. Despite her desperate pleas, I told her repeatedly that I could never trust or be intimate with her again and that I wanted a divorce. Each time I expressed this desire, she became increasingly hysterical. Ultimately, I communicated that I would consider staying in the marriage only if she agreed to a post-nuptial agreement. This was inspired by a story I had read about a man who had put such an agreement in place after discovering his wife's infidelity. I found myself in a similar predicament and realized the importance of protecting my interests. The postnuptial agreement would outline the affair and state that should either of us seek a divorce in the future due to this infidelity, she would not be entitled to alimony and would only receive 25% of our jointly held assets, instead of the typical 50%. Additionally, we agreed to maintain 50-50 custody of our children, with me as the primary residence. I presented her with a choice: accept the postnuptial agreement or face an immediate divorce, which would entitle her to alimony, 50% of our assets, and likely primary custody of the children. She opted for the postnuptial agreement but requested that we exclude any mention of the affair from the document due to her feelings of shame. I firmly rejected her request, making it clear that without acknowledging the affair, there wouldn't be a solid basis for the agreement. However, we did agree to keep the affair confidential between ourselves, a decision I would later regret. We attempted to move forward from this devastating chapter, but I voiced my skepticism about our ability to be anything more than roommates co-parenting our children. Despite our agreement to keep the secret, she sobbed and vowed to spend the rest of her life working to regain my trust and unconditional love. In the following week, I sought counsel from a divorce attorney, and within 2 weeks, we signed and filed the postnuptial agreement. As a precaution, I insisted that both of us undergo STD testing and arranged for DNA tests for our children, given my complete lack of trust in her at that moment. While the necessity of the STD panels caused her additional shame and embarrassment, the suggestion for DNA testing left her profoundly saddened and depressed. She asserted that the children were undoubtedly mine but eventually agreed to the tests, recognizing that my trust in her had significantly plummeted. Over the next 2 years, we lived a dismal existence. We maintained a facade that became increasingly toxic to our emotional well-being and sanity. We pretended everything was fine, keeping up appearances with our children, extended family, and friends. It was a grueling experience, characterized by deep-seated resentment and a constant undercurrent of heartbreak that permeated every aspect of our lives. My wife maintained all her clothing in our master bedroom, which served as the backdrop for a carefully constructed facade of normalcy in our lives. Each night, we would retreat to our bedroom and create the illusion that we were a couple sharing a bed just like we always had. However, once the door was closed and the lights dimmed, I would quietly signal for her to move to the spare bedroom, as I sought to avoid any physical contact with her. For a full 2 years, we adhered to this unspoken arrangement. In front of our children, family, and friends, we presented ourselves as a loving couple, holding hands and exchanging light kisses on the lips. Yet, in those moments alone, I turned a cold shoulder to her, treating her with an indifference that grew more pronounced over time. This emotional distance morphed into a deep-seated repulsion. I found myself increasingly unable to tolerate her presence. Despite my feelings, she remained relentlessly committed to rekindling the love we once shared, while I resolutely maintained my emotional distance and refusal to engage. I took steps to further distance myself, suggesting that she pursue a part-time job that would keep her busy while our children were at school. Our daily routine became almost mechanical. Every morning, we left the house at roughly the same time, maintaining the appearance of a cohesive family unit. After her workday, she would pick up the kids, return home, and prepare dinner. I would come home around 6 p.m., and we would sit down together for dinner, clean up afterward, and spend the remainder of the evening with the children. Our time together revolved around them, involving conversations, games, movie nights, and helping with homework. Weekends were particularly telling. I would take the kids on various outings, a trip to the science center, museums, amusement parks, the zoo, swimming, hiking, and more, while leaving my wife at home. We often left early in the morning and did not return until late afternoon, and while she longed to join us, I preferred it otherwise. To maintain appearances, we both pretended that my weekends away with the kids were a much-needed mommy break for her, a chance to escape her weekly responsibilities of cooking and household chores. Looking back, those 2 years were undoubtedly the most challenging period of my life. However, things took an unexpected turn one Saturday when our children spent the day with my wife's parents. I found myself in a bind while trying to install shelves and bike racks in the garage. Reluctantly, I walked into the house and asked my wife for help. Her excitement was palpable, as this marked the first time in over 2 years that I had reached out for her assistance with anything. She had just finished a bath, and the clean scent of shampoo and soap lingered around her. I noticed she had shaved her legs and was dressed in very short shorts and a midriff-bearing t-shirt. It was clear she had gone to great lengths to look appealing for me, as she had a habit of dressing provocatively whenever we found ourselves alone, though those instances were few and far between due to my own choices. To install the shelving unit, I had to slide beneath the bottom shelf, which stood about 3.5 feet above the ground. She positioned herself beside me, holding the shelf against the wall. All I could see were her legs, which extended just beyond her belly button, and to my surprise, it stirred something within me. I found myself guiding her closer and closer as I struggled to position the shelf correctly, leading to a fit of laughter between us when she ended up nearly on top of me. I'll admit that those last few inches between us were more than just a little unnecessary, but they felt just right in that moment. Once we successfully mounted the shelf, I crawled out from beneath it, still laughing. She remarked that it had been fun, and without saying a word, I slowly placed my drill on the shelf, then took her by surprise by pulling her in for a kiss. Her smile was infectious, and I took her hand, leading her upstairs to our bedroom. That afternoon turned into one incredible experience, filled with making love, deep conversations, cuddling, and even showering together. It was a day that marked not just a break in our routine but a significant turning point in our relationship. It was one of the most unforgettable days of my life, a genuine rekindling of the bond we had once shared. This day became the cornerstone of what I would come to view as our second marriage. Since that moment, our lives together flourished over the next 11 years, filled with love, happiness, and bliss. I couldn't have asked for a better wife and mother. In the immediate aftermath of our renewed connection, I found myself obsessively reflecting on the rekindling of our relationship, thinking about it every waking minute. Yet as time progressed, I realized I could go months without it even crossing my mind. We haven't revisited the subject of that period in years, allowing it to be a distant memory, overshadowed by the love and joy we've cultivated together since. I stopped bringing the subject up to her after that magical Saturday when I felt we had finally left that dark chapter behind us. Our married life had been nothing short of perfect, filled with love and connection, until everything changed with the unexpected return of Mrs. Jones. Once again, my world was turned completely upside down. It was a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning on September 3, 2022, when I wandered into a massive home improvement store, just like any other weekend. As I perused the aisles, a woman approached me, mentioning my name with a familiarity that caught me off guard. I confirmed that I was indeed the person she spoke of, and she proceeded to introduce herself, giving both her first and last name. Strangely enough, her face didn't ring any bells, but her voice sounded vaguely familiar, as if I had heard it before but couldn't quite place it. Then, she added a twist to our introduction by saying, "You might remember me by my former last name, Jones." As soon as those words left her lips, it all clicked. Though we had never met face to face and had only spoken once over the phone, I recognized her in that moment. I was taken aback to realize that the woman I had always imagined as being around the same age as my wife had somehow aged significantly. She looked to be in her late 50s, yet she carried herself with a certain grace. Mrs. Jones mentioned that she recognized me from some of my online photos and was keen to catch up, inquiring about how life had turned out for me. I responded honestly, sharing the news that my wife and I had reconciled and had been living happily together since that tumultuous period. The surprise that flashed across her face was palpable, and in that moment of awkwardness, all I could manage was a clumsy, "I'm so sorry" for my wife's actions. Her reply, however, shifted the entire tone of our conversation. "Don't apologize," she said. "We were married to two demons." With that statement hanging in the air, she proceeded to unravel a series of revelations that would change my life forever. "You're obviously a much bigger person than me," she said, her voice steady. It was at that moment she disclosed that she had found out her husband had been having an affair with my wife every Wednesday morning for a staggering 16 months, right there in their own bed. I was dumbfounded, unable to process the weight of her words as she continued. There was no way I was staying with him after that. Mrs. Jones further recounted the painful details of her betrayal, saying her husband had cheated on her not just on regular days, but on significant occasions too: Valentine's Day, her birthday, Christmas Eve, and their anniversary. All those times he went home to her after being unfaithful, it was as if he lived a double life. I was stunned, but I listened intently as she shared these heart-wrenching truths. "Karma is a real force," she declared, and she went on to explain how her ex-husband's life had spiraled into chaos after their divorce. It turned out that he had been terminated from his job for conducting the affair during work hours, something she reported out of necessity. Following the termination, it was revealed that he held the position of vice president of sales and had been involved in commission fraud for over 5 years, submitting falsified sales data. As a result, the company pressed both criminal and civil charges against him, pursuing restitution totaling more than $240,000. While the criminal charges were dropped after he paid the restitution, the financial fallout had completely drained a significant portion of his divorce settlement. Mrs. Jones explained that her ex-husband made an attempt to rebuild his life in the Orlando, Florida area, hoping for a fresh start. However, that endeavor only led him to declare bankruptcy. The weight of the situation didn't let up, as she revealed that he suffered a severe heart attack the previous year, which had left him with significant damage to his heart. At the age of 66, he experienced limited mobility and relied on a cane to walk, ultimately being forced into retirement. At 68 now, he was a shadow of the man he once was, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he had before, especially given the 30-year age gap between him and my wife. She painted a picture of his current life, describing him as an isolated, financially struggling elderly man rejected by his 2 children, who harbored deep resentment toward him. Despite this, she emphasized that she held no ill will toward him and had always encouraged their children to maintain a healthy relationship with their father. Unfortunately, the damage had been done, and they couldn't stand him. Towards the end of our conversation, she shared that she had remarried 8 years ago and was happier than she had ever been. We exchanged phone numbers, and she offered to share more details about the affair or even send copies of emails if I ever wanted them. I expressed my gratitude for her openness and wished her well as we parted ways. By the time I walked out of the store, I was engulfed by a sense of emotional numbness, a realization dawning upon me that my wife had blatantly deceived me. Our entire second marriage was built on a foundation of lies. This was no brief affair. She had lived a completely separate existence with this man for 16 long months, engaging in intimate relations while our parents were watching our children. Instead of feeling sadness, I was overwhelmed with disgust, rage, and anger. The emotions that engulfed me were unlike anything I had ever felt before. This overwhelming anger consumed me to a degree that left me deeply troubled. In that moment, I realized that returning home was not an option. I felt uncertain about my ability to manage these intense feelings. Instead of facing my wife, I sent her a text explaining that I would be doing some extra shopping and picking up food from a fast food drive-thru, letting her know that I wouldn't be home for lunch. Over the next 4 hours, I meticulously crafted a plan for how to confront my wife. I outlined each step I intended to take, and I made sure to share my thoughts here to get some feedback. During this period, my wife reached out multiple times, calling and texting to check in on me. I assured her that I was just out shopping and hinted that I'd have a surprise for her when I returned home. Although she responded with an "Okay, I love you, see you when you get here," I could sense a hint of suspicion and concern in her tone, likely because shopping isn't typically my thing. The action plan I devised was straightforward but weighed heavily on my mind. I decided I would confront my wife that evening, on Saturday. I planned to move her belongings into the spare bedroom that same night. The following day, I intended to break the news to our children, and on Labor Day, I would share the news with our parents. Additionally, I aimed to meet with an attorney on Tuesday to draft an in-house separation agreement. At the end of a 90-day period, I would have to make a decision among 3 options: reconciling our relationship, proceeding with a divorce, or extending the evaluation period for another 90 days. As a quick update, I had meant to share more about my situation last month, but life has been a whirlwind both personally and professionally. On the career front, I recently received a promotion to Vice President of Customer Service. After dedicating 5 years to my role at an internet service provider, I transitioned into a customer care manager position at a large privately held industrial company. Over the last 13 years, I have steadily climbed the corporate ladder to reach the highest position in my department. My family and employees have expressed their excitement for me, and I take pride in having my hard work recognized and rewarded. This new role will involve both in-state and out-of-state travel, which I anticipate will provide a welcome distraction as I confront the personal challenges ahead in the coming year. Turning back to my personal situation, I confronted my wife, and during this difficult conversation, she confessed to everything. She revealed that she had not been completely honest about certain things 13 years ago because she feared that I would choose to divorce her if I knew the full story. The affair had lasted for 16 months, and it had all started when they crossed paths while waiting in line at a popular coffee shop that she frequented almost daily. From there, their meetings became a regular occurrence, taking place every Wednesday under the pretense of discussing work. On their 3rd meeting, he invited her to his home to check out his new exercise spin bike. She admitted knowing that it was wrong and that there was a chance for something to happen, yet she still couldn't resist the temptation. She disclosed that their first encounter took place on a sofa in his basement, but following that, they continued their meetings in his marital bed. The details continued to unravel painfully as she confided how they had engaged in everything without using protection. I regrettably asked for specifics, and I felt my emotional state crumble beyond repair at that moment. She acknowledged that, despite her infidelity, she had made sure that I was satisfied sexually throughout the affair, claiming that she initiated those encounters to fulfill my desires. Hearing this only added to my disgust and emotional turmoil. I couldn't help but suggest that perhaps she had an underlying mental illness, as anyone in their right mind would not inflict such cruelty on their spouse and family. She agreed, breaking down in tears, sharing that she had wanted desperately to end the affair but found herself unable to do so until it was brought to light, which she claimed was the wake-up call she needed. She insisted that she loved only me and felt no emotional attachment to him. I countered her assertion by stating that it was utterly unbelievable to think she could have engaged in a 16-month-long affair without forming strong feelings for the other person. The depth of betrayal and the emotional wreckage left me utterly devastated. She held on to her denial, tears flowing throughout our conversation as she pleaded for my forgiveness. She repeatedly asked me to remember and focus on the wonderful life we had built together over the past 11 years. With a trembling voice, she insisted, I always made sure I was a great wife and mom, even when I was having the affair. Her words struck me as ironic and left me questioning the sincerity of her statement, which seemed to baffle her. I compared her explanation to a professional thief standing before a judge, claiming, I've been an upstanding and law-abiding citizen for the past 16 months, except for the banks I robbed every Wednesday morning. I firmly asserted that during that time, her actions were far from those of a good wife and mother. In fact, they were quite the opposite. As she sobbed in agreement, she expressed a strong desire for psychiatric help and therapy, asking if I would support her on this journey. I responded that we could discuss it later. When I inquired about her decision to be with him, she broke down, begging me to stop bringing it up, claiming it made her feel terrible. She continued, I have suffered mentally because of this for 13 years. Pushing for clarity, I pressed her to reveal why she had chosen him. She explained, I was young, impressionable, and isolated as a stay-at-home mom. He was this mature man, the most respected and successful figure in the company. I couldn't believe he was showing interest in me. I know it was incredibly foolish and morally wrong, but I wanted to be honest with you. Hearing her justification felt like a gut punch, yet I thanked her for her honesty. I confronted her directly, pointing out that she played a role in breaking up a family. She looked at me, her expression a mix of sorrow and confusion. I informed her that the Joneses had divorced shortly after their affair, and their children no longer maintained a relationship with him. That's terrible, she cried, admitting that she felt immense guilt for what she had done. I asked if she had any idea about the consequences of her actions, to which she replied that she had completely blocked him from her mind after I confronted her. I continued, you probably aren't aware of your former lover's current condition, are you? She interrupted me, insisting, stop calling him that. You are my lover, and you have been for 19 years and always will be. I informed her that Mr. Jones had suffered a severe heart attack and was in declining health, now residing in Florida. She questioned my motives in sharing this news, even though she claimed not to wish harm on anyone. I explained that I thought she might want to know about someone she had been involved with. Her response was adamant, she wanted me to stop talking about it, asserting, I never loved him. I've moved forward and want to leave those difficult days behind. In a moment of hurt, I remarked, well, if things don't work out for us, I'm sure he'd appreciate having his young companion back to assist him. This comment sent her into a fresh wave of tears as she rushed to our bedroom, throwing herself on the bed and sobbing for an hour. I felt a pang of guilt, waffling on whether to apologize, but I recognized that my comment paled in comparison to what she and her former lover had done to me and Mrs. Jones. I let her express her emotions, choosing to retreat upstairs to tell her it was time to move her belongings to the spare bedroom. She begged and pleaded, but I remained firm. Eventually, she reluctantly helped me relocate all of her possessions. I won't deny that it was emotionally taxing. She was in tears, and I found myself shedding quite a few as well during discreet bathroom breaks, unwilling to show my emotions in front of her. The conversation with our children went as smoothly as one might expect under the circumstances. At first, my wife couldn't bear to face them, she wanted me to break the news alone. However, she eventually joined us and took it upon herself to explain everything while keeping her composure. The kids were upset and disgusted with her, showing more concern for me in the initial weeks that followed our talk. Yet, as we continued to spend time together, discussing all that had happened, they gradually began to come to terms with the situation. Both expressed that they still loved their mom deeply, but their perception of her had been forever altered, at least for the time being. Talking to our parents turned out to be a much more difficult experience than I had anticipated. When we finally gathered for the meetings, it was clear that all four of them were struggling with their emotions. Our mothers, in particular, were overcome with sadness, crying heavily, and their tears seemed to resonate with our fathers, who also found themselves tearing up. It was a heavy atmosphere, and at both meetings, we had to take multiple breaks to try and compose ourselves. What seemed to hit them the hardest was the realization that they had been looking after our children during a time when my wife was involved with someone else. That revelation clearly weighed heavily on their hearts, and disturbingly, both sets of parents felt a deep sense of guilt about the situation, as if they somehow contributed to the turmoil in our lives. While they were all upset with my wife, my mother's feelings softened slightly over time, but the same couldn't be said for our fathers. They were utterly disgusted with her actions and have made it clear that they refuse to engage or communicate with her at all. Even though these events took place 13 years ago, the wound still felt fresh. With our legal separation agreement now signed and officially in effect, we both made the decision to continue living in the same house for the time being. My wife begged me not to go through with the separation, expressing her desperation to keep our family intact, but I felt it was necessary to move forward. Since then, things at home have been relatively calm. We manage to communicate daily, and our interactions with our kids are slowly beginning to feel more normal, even if the atmosphere is still tinged with a sense of discomfort. As for my relationship with my wife, there is no intimacy between us. I find that I have absolutely no desire for her, which is a hard truth to face, especially when she is so eager for my affection. It's clear that I am emotionally detached, a state of being I had set out for myself as part of my plan. I am committed to giving ourselves a 90-day period to decide on our next steps. The options are straightforward. We can either proceed with a divorce, attempt reconciliation, or extend the separation for a longer time to see how things develop. This may very well be my final update on the situation, but it's possible I'll return with insights about the decisions we ultimately reach. The feedback I received from everyone has been fascinating. It appears to be evenly divided between those who lean toward divorce and those who believe reconciliation could be a viable path. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to everyone who has taken the time to listen to my story and provide their feedback. You may not realize just how much your support has helped me in navigating this incredibly challenging chapter in my life.